This episode of Hot Cup Cold Case contains disturbing details about a violent crime and may not be appropriate for some listeners. I'm Brant,
I'm Rachel.
and this is Hot Cup,
Cold Case.
where we share with you the two things that keep us up at night. And the first is a hot cup of caffeine, and the second is a cold case. So we've got our hot tea poured, and Rach is going to share a story with us tonight about a cold case that I know nothing about. And then I'm going to share a story with you about a closed case that Rach knows nothing about. And then we'll end the episode with a short but strange criminal story that we like to call a mugshot.
And this one's hilarious.
But before we get into that, I want to follow up on my sister's friend in Texas who went missing on New Year's Day. I mentioned this at the top of the last episode. So for those of you who don't follow us on social media or who haven't listened to the previous episode yet, Chelsea Lynn Williams-Quinones is a friend of my sister, and she went missing on New Year's Day. She was last seen at her Fort Worth residence around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on January 1st of 2020. And according to my sister, the Quinones family filed a missing persons report with the local police when they realized that not only was Chelsea missing, but her car was still parked outside her house and her cell phone wasn't working. And they also asked for everyone's help sharing Chelsea's information, which is why we shared it with our listeners in the first place. But in a statement released by Chelsea's mother a few days later on January 4th, she reported, quote, "We would like to thank everyone for the prayers and thoughts. We have found Chelsea. She is safe, and we will update you with more information as we have it. Please respect our privacy during this time. We will answer questions when we have more information." And as of right now, that's all the information that we do have. I'm just glad to know that Chelsea's safe.
Yes, absolutely.
So we may share more missing persons reports like these from time to time, especially when it comes to someone we know or are connected to in some way.
I was texting her sister to see if she heard anything else.
Oh, did she say anything?
She hasn't texted me back yet.
Well, while we wait to see if my sister texts us back, I really enjoyed recording that listener stories episode.
Oh, I did too. It was so fun.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And I really want to do it again. So for all our listeners out there, we want to hear about the scariest thing that has ever happened to you. We would love to collect and share these stories on our podcast. And so if you have a story you want to share with us, you can email it to us at hotcupcoldcasepodcast@gmail.com, or you can DM us on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, we really want to hear your stories. It was such a fun episode and a little bit different than what we're used to doing. We're just really grateful for those of you who did send your stories in.
And for those of you who did send your stories in and we didn't share them yet, don't worry. We will get to them. We'll do more listener stories episodes in the future.
Oh, absolutely. We had a fun little incident happen this week. Our precious little daughter started preschool.
Yeah, I was really proud of her. And surprisingly, none of us cried. I think the funniest moment was when she walked into the class and looked at the teacher and was like, "Hey, she looks like my grandma."
My grandma, yeah, it was so funny.
I'm sure that made the teacher feel great.
Yeah, for sure.
I was like, "Daughter, you're not making any friends here."
Daughter.
I didn't want to say her name.
Oh my God, so funny.
I got to protect the innocent.
Yes.
So when I was driving home from work one day this week, I ran into a police blockade with like a dozen police and emergency vehicles diverting traffic. So I told Rach about it when I got home, and she did some investigating. And what did you find, Rach?
For those of you who don't, see snow often, you don't really have to deal with this. So this story was a semi-truck I guess, was driving down the road and had accelerated. And when he did, the whole sheet of snow, which was like mixed with ice at that point, flew off the back or the top of the truck and crashed into a school bus's windshield.
Yeah, Rach actually found this report and sent it to me. Apparently, the bus had just left a junior high and was filled with teenagers. And they suddenly heard the bus driver scream, and then a giant sheet of ice just came crashing through the front windshield. And it actually badly injured the bus driver and another student.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But somehow the bus driver was able to safely steer the bus to the side of the road, and the students actually called 911. And when they got there, they took the bus driver and the other student who was injured to a nearby hospital.
Well, and there's a 13-year-old that was on the bus that really stepped up and said he did what his mom taught him to do. So he got up from the back of the bus and he used the radio near the driver, and he called into the dispatch and said, the bus has crashed and the driver's bleeding from her head down. And he's the one that like notified 911.
Oh, wow. I just assumed that one of the teenagers used their cell phone.
Yeah, I guess like he knew that there was a radio there. I don't really know, but
wow.
Yeah, I think that's awesome though. A 13-year-old, I'm pretty impressed that, you know, he wasn't freaking out too.
Yeah, there's two kinds of people in an emergency. There's the kind of person that just freezes. Mm-hmm. And then there's the kind of person who shuts everything else down and only thinks about what needs to be done and then like falls apart later. And that's me.
Yeah.
I definitely shut all emotions down, just do what needs to be done. And then literally weeks later, sometimes we'll have a panic attack.
I think mine just depends on the situation. But this little boy was, or he's not a little boy, he's a young man, was honored at his school by the principal. So I thought that was really awesome.
That is really awesome.
But what's not awesome, Michiganders, and anyone else who lives with snow and ice, if you can reach the top of your car, clean it off.
Yeah, it's actually illegal here in Michigan to drive with snow or ice on top of your car.
Well, you wouldn't think so because everybody does it.
Yeah, it does happen quite a bit. And in this semi-truck driver's defense, there is really no way to keep ice from collecting on top of the truck.
I mean, that's
Number
true.
one, it's like 16 feet up in the air. Number two, a lot of times that ice collects while they're driving because of the wind chill.
Right.
But that's also why it's important to maintain a safe distance behind the vehicle in front of you. Although you and I never follow too closely on the highway. And there's been a couple times where a sheet of ice has flown off our car and just flew like a full 100 feet back and almost hit us and caused us to wreck. So I understand why it happened with this semi-truck driver. But what I don't understand is when I see a sedan driving down the road that has like a foot of snow on top of it.
I agree.
Someone who easily could have cleaned that off before they took off. It's dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
Well, you've got your bouncy ball.
I do. Check.
For your posture. And I've got my tea. Let's dive into these stories.
All right, let's do it. So tonight, I have a cold case for you. And apparently this one is also kind of widely known, but I'd never heard about it. Tonight, I am talking about the Springfield 3.
Never heard of it.
Right? Okay. So let me set the scene for you, okay? It's June 7th, 1992. It's the day after the high school graduation in Springfield, Missouri. Two teenagers, Stacy McCall, she's 18, about 5'3", 120 pounds, blonde with long hair and light color eyes. And Susie Streeter, she's 19, she's 5'2", about 102 pounds with shoulder-length blonde hair and brown eyes. They were relaxing and they are ready to celebrate after graduation. So June 7th was a Friday night and there were various plans circling around all the young people with different grad parties and different just parties happening. But everyone had the same plan and were on the same page about Saturday, June 8th. They were all going to be meeting up to go to a water park in Branson, Missouri early on Saturday morning. This was, just the way to celebrate after graduation. Mm-hmm. So a little tidbit. Have you ever been to Branson?
No, whenever I graduated, my mom surprised my best friend and I with a trip to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Okay, way to one-up everyone.
I know, it was really nice. But I remember I was super angry with my best friend.
Oh, I remember this story.
Yeah, because
your dumb best friend.
We get to the timeshare that my grandfather had, and he unpacks his suitcase and pulls out a machete.
What, you just going all Spanish on us now?
I was really going for the actual pronunciation.
Great. So for those of you who didn't understand, Brant.
For the rest of America.
Thank you.
A machete.
A machete. Gosh.
And I was like, dude, why did you bring a machete? And he was like, oh, I just wanted to see if I could.
Oh my gosh.
He just wanted to see if he could get a machete past airport security and customs. And he did. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm mad at you or the TSA.
Dear Lord.
Yeah.
No, that is not even right. That's not okay.
I was so mad because I was like, you put us all in jeopardy.
Yes.
Of a cavity search.
Oh, God, that's disgusting.
And I have never left the country with that guy again.
Yeah, I don't know if I would either. You know who you are.
Yeah, you know who you are.
Oh my gosh. If our daughter's friends ever did anything like that, I literally would leave them.
I'm like, yeah, you're in Mexico. You got a machete.
Yeah, you can survive.
You'll be fine.
I'm over here trying to talk about Branson, and you hijacked this conversation to talk about your luxurious graduation gift. You're such a brat. All right, back to the story. Oh, and I will put a little warning in here. The names of the Springfield 3 are the victims.
Oh, okay.
And they're all similar names. So it's going to get confusing as I'm talking about it. So you're going to have to pay attention.
Okay.
So Friday, June 7th, the day before they were supposed to go to the water park, they were all kind of graduation, party hopping, looking for alcohol. They had various plans that were decided, and then they're teenagers, so they're changed at the last minute. And then something else was planned, and then that was changed. And, it can just go back and forth. So one of their plans was they were going to book a hotel room in Branson so they wouldn't have to get up super early on Saturday morning to drive out there. But Stacy's mom, which is one of the girls I mentioned earlier,
okay,
she was not about that life and did not like the idea of her daughter going to some random hotel room with some random young people.
It sounds like Stacy's mom has got it going on.
How long were you waiting to say that? Oh my God. I can't even.
I couldn't resist.
I knew you had something going on because your face lit up for a second. God.
You could see the twinkle in my eye. I mean, when you wrote down Stacy's mom in your notes, did it really not think that you were setting me up?
No, I didn't. It did not even occur to me at all. God. Of course not. Anyway, so Stacy and Susie, the two girls I mentioned at the beginning, they decided to go to their friend Janelle Kirby's house. Now, Janelle is also referred to as just Kirby. Okay? All right. So they decided to go to Janelle Kirby's house and stay there, but upon arrival, realized that Kirby's house was super crowded from family that was in town for a graduation. Not sure how she didn't realize that was going to happen, but
they're
teenagers. So the girls decided that they would just rather go back to Susie's house that she shares with her mom, Cheryl, and be able to, sleep in a bed and not on the floor with all these random people. So we got Susie, Stacy, and Cheryl. Okay. So Susie and Cheryl, mom and daughter. Stacy is the friend.
Yeah.
All right. Susie and Stacy each had their own car. So they left Kirby's house around 2 a.m. to go back to her house.
To go back to Cheryl's house?
Cheryl and Susie's house.
Okay.
Yeah. So they left Kirby's house to go home, and they all decided, all right, hey, we're going to meet up with you in the morning around 7 to decide how we're going to carpool and
head out to Branson.
Okay. Right. So Kirby started calling Cheryl and Susie's house around 7, because they were going to meet up. Mm-hmm. Well, the girls never answered. So Kirby at this point is starting to get a little annoyed. We made these plans last night. You were supposed to wake up. So she's thinking they're probably just oversleeping from partying all night. So after a couple hours of trying to call, Kirby and her boyfriend drive over to Cheryl and Susie's house. Upon arrival at Susie's, Kirby and her boyfriend go to the door to knock on it and realize that the dome that goes over the porch light is shattered on the ground. So the bulb is still intact and screwed in, but the dome that goes over the light, that's on the floor, shattered and
like it fell.
Tons of pieces, maybe, or
Okay.
I mean, we don't know. So they knock on the door, but no one answers and realize the front door is unlocked. So they just go in. And Kirby's boyfriend grabs a broom and starts to clean up the glass, which is very kind of an 18-year-old kid just to take it upon himself to clean up broken glass. Then he disposed of the glass in the trash can, also, though, disposing of any potential evidence.
Yeah, I had a feeling that they were walking into a crime scene.
So the problem is that they walk in and they see Cheryl's Yorkie, little dog, named Cinnamon. And Cinnamon seems very agitated, which I guess was out of nature for the dog. But they look around the house and there's no sign of the girls. All three of them, Susie, Stacy, Cheryl. Their purses are all there and they're kind of like oddly lined up outside of Susie's door. And there were a few clothing items of Stacy's. There were washcloths on the bathroom counter that had makeup on them, so it indicated, that they washed their face that night. And they were getting ready for bed, or they had gone to bed. Susie and Cheryl were smokers too, and both their purses still contained their cigarettes. It said that Cheryl was such a chain smoker that she literally wouldn't even walk into the next room without taking her cigarettes with her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So for her to leave these behind.
That's a huge deal.
It's a big deal. Okay.
Now, most smokers have more than one pack, I think, if you're that, big of a chain smoker. But the purses were left. All of their items are left. There's nothing wrong with the house. Everything looks like they just walked out.
There
was no sign of a struggle. Nothing.
Weird.
Very weird. So before Kirby and her boyfriend were about to leave, the phone rang and she answered it. She claims it was a strange and disturbing phone call from an unidentified man, and he started to make sexual innuendos at her, and so she hung up, and immediately she received another call from the man, and he started again with the sexual nature of the call, and so she hung up. And at that point, it's just super weird. And so Kirby and her boyfriend left because they're like, well, they're not here. We don't really know where they went. But their cars were still there. Everything was still there, as if they were still there. It was very, very odd. They didn't call the police, though. And so they left. And later on in the day, Janice, who is Stacy's mom, tried reaching out to Stacy because it had gotten late in the day. She hadn't heard from her daughter. So the last place that she knew that Stacy was going to be was Kirby's. So she called Kirby's house, and Kirby's sister answered and informed her that, it was a last-minute decision. She just decided to stay at Susie's. So Janice is not happy, obviously. Why didn't my daughter tell me where she was going? She tried to call Susie's house. No answer. So she went over there. She went inside because the door was unlocked. She noticed all the purses. Again, they were just in this row, so it was a little strange. She saw some of her daughter's clothing that she had on the night before was neatly folded. So she is getting a bad feeling. She's like, something is wrong. There's no sign of a struggle. It's just weird.
Yeah.
So she immediately called the police, and she also checked the answering machine. We have to remember that it's 1992, so there is no cell phones, and they have those old school answering machines, right? So a lot of times with specific answering machines like those, once you listen to it, it just automatically deleted it. She said that there was a strange message that she accidentally deleted. So it's not like she deleted it on purpose or was careless. It just did it.
Oh, okay.
That's what they're thinking. And she couldn't really recall much of the message, but she said it was strange and of a sexual nature too.
Maybe from that guy.
Well, we'll get into that in a second. But the police were very interested in this call, thinking it could definitely be linked to the missing woman. So they came by the house and they just left a note.
They left a note?
They left a note on the door.
What did the note say? Hey, if you're not dead, call us back.
Right. When you return, please let us know. It was something of that nature, but They didn't go in. They didn't search. They didn't tape the house off. They didn't look at anything. They just left a note.
I guess the police thought since these girls were planning a trip anyways that they had just gone out of town. But what's weird is those purses. Why would they have left without their purses?
Right. So this is Saturday evening. So they waited till Monday. They just assumed they were going to come back, I guess. So at that point, after not hearing from the ladies, they decided, well, I guess we need to look into it. The problem is that by that point, 10 to 20 people had been in that house looking for the women.
Wow.
There were various family members that came in because, everyone was worried at that point. So the crime scene is totally contaminated.
Yeah, it's completely compromised at this point.
Yeah. And they never even looked at the glass in the trash can, like from the dome light. They didn't think there was a link between the prank calls that Kirby answered in the message on the machine that Janice deleted, which I thought was really weird. Like,
they sound very similar.
That's what I think. But they're the police. I'm sure that they know things that we don't. But on the surface, it seems like there very much could be a link between them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's very weird. So the police said that there didn't seem to be any signs of a struggle except for that broken porch light, and all things of value and personal property were left behind. I did point out the girls' height and weight because I did want to point out that they're kind of petite.
Yeah.
So
even if they had put up a fight, it probably wouldn't have been much.
Right.
Yeah. God, that's scary.
It's really scary. One thing that was super strange to me too was in those purses, one of them was Cheryl's, and she had $800 in cash, which in 1992 is a lot of money. That's a lot of money now, but
yeah, I was going to say,
then,
it's a lot of money right now.
Well, just to carry around, like, it was weird. Like, nothing was normal. But Cheryl, the mom, was also blonde. She had brown eyes. She was super petite, about 5 feet, 110 pounds. She was 47. And she worked as a local hairstylist and was super popular. She had about 250 faithful clients. So I was thinking maybe that's why she had so much cash in her purse.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it was the 90s and it could have been tips.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or people could have just paid with cash anyway, their full service. So, that's it. There's no trace of these women. I have some tips and theories and a few items, but as far as anything about these women, that's it. They just vanished.
Voice on the answering machine is giving me the heebie-jeebies.
But why would someone call back? I think that's weird. And there's zero evidence. How do you have zero evidence from a crime scene?
Yeah, the fact that there didn't seem to be any signs of a struggle could point to it being somebody they knew and were comfortable with.
Yes, and I could see that too. The last time anyone heard from Susie and Stacy was at 2:00 in the morning when they were leaving Kirby's house. The last time anyone heard from Cheryl was at 11:15 that night. A friend had called her and she was redoing a dresser, painting one. And her friend said they talked for a few minutes and everything was fine. And she gave no indication that someone was with her or it was weird or she was in jeopardy. It just seemed like a normal call. So that's the last time we know that Cheryl was there.
Oh my God, what if something happened to Cheryl before the girls got there? And they showed up at 2 a.m. and were taken because they walked in on a crime.
That's true. There's tons of theories and ideas, none of which have any evidence to back them up.
God, that is
because
so
all
scary.
3 cars were there. All 3 purses were there. Any personal property was left. It's just weird. It's so odd. But you know just as well as I do that in any type of crime, the immediate family and any romantic relationships are looked into first.
Yeah.
So that's what they did. So the first person of interest was Bart Streeter. He was Cheryl's son and Susie's brother. He had been estranged from the family prior to this event happening because he had a substance abuse problem and a drinking problem. But he had an alibi and he passed a polygraph. So the police eliminated him as a suspect.
Okay.
But he was a little weird. And he was recently...
But being a little weird doesn't make you
Right. It doesn't make you a murderer.
Right.
The next one is a little strange. This
Okay.
is the weirdest story I think I've ever heard.
Okay,
So
lay it on me.
the second person of interest is Susie's ex-boyfriend. His name was Dustin Rekla. Susie broke it off with Dustin a few months prior to them disappearing. She found out her weirdo boyfriend was also a thief, and a super weird thief.
Oh no.
So Dustin and a few of his friends were apparently breaking into mausoleums, decapitating corpses.
What?
And stealing their gold teeth.
Oh my God.
I know.
That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard somebody found out about their lover.
I know. And then after they would take the teeth out, then they would just throw the heads in nearby trees.
In nearby trees?
Yes. Like so flippin' weird. And then they tried to sell the gold fillings.
Okay, you know what? I know I said being weird doesn't make you a murderer, but Dustin did it, guys. Come on. He's decapitating heads.
I know.
Removing
it's weird.
teeth and then tossing the heads into trees?
And then trying to be a moron and sell gold teeth. Like as if someone's not going to know where they came from.
I gotta be honest, Rach. I'd rather find out you were seeing another man. I feel like that would be a lot easier to deal with.
Oh my God.
I would much rather find out you were seeing another man than you were out in the wee hours of the morning decapitating corpses.
I know.
And taking their
so
teeth.
Weird. It's so weird. So they eventually got caught because you can't just try to pawn off some gold teeth and people not get suspicious.
Right.
So police were made aware of this weird crime that was taking place and were building a case. And Susie had actually provided the police with information to help charge the boys. Police wondered if they could be connected with the women's disappearance. So they interviewed the boys, and Dustin denied having any involvement, and so did the friends. One of the friends, during his interview with police, said, "I wasn't involved, but I hope they are all dead."
What?
Like, who says that?
Oh my God. How insensitive. I mean, we already know they're insensitive. They're decapitating corpses.
Right. I know.
But that does seem like a very strange thing to say about 3 girls who are missing. So he obviously didn't like them.
Right. He was mad because Susie gave information to help put them behind bars.
Yeah, and it's not really that huge of a leap to hope someone's dead and to be the one responsible.
Right. But the problem is that the police were never able to link the two. And I guess that they also had alibis that checked out because I don't even think they're like a person of interest anymore.
Wow.
Because after that, the boys ended up taking a plea deal anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. So the police got another tip. A woman living in a neighborhood about a mile away from Susie and Cheryl's told investigators that at 6:30 on June 7th, she saw a van being driven by Susie Streeter, who appeared to have been crying heavily. And then she heard a man's voice telling her not to do anything stupid.
What?
The woman says she only recognized Susie as the driver after seeing her photo on the news.
Oh my God, I think these girls were taken.
The witness gave police a detailed description of the van. So the police ended up buying an identical van and put it outside the police department, seeing if it would jog anyone's memory, because it was like this weird green color. But they asked for any tips, like if you've seen this van, please let us know. Despite receiving many calls and extensive searches, this didn't turn up any new evidence.
Oh my God.
And a lot of people refute this woman's sighting because she was like on her porch.
Uh-huh.
So how would you hear someone say something to someone in a car?
That's what I was going to ask.
Like on the road. Like how would you hear that? The windows were up.
Yeah, her story does seem a little weird.
Yeah, it is a little strange. So anyway, so that was one lead. The police got another lead from an unlikely place, Florida. They were pointed toward a man named Robert Cox. He was convicted in 1988, 10 years earlier, of abducting and murdering a woman named Sharon Zellers. He was placed on death row, But the ruling was overturned by the Florida Supreme Court, and Robert served only 18 months in prison before being released to California.
He went from death row to 18 months? Holy cow.
And I don't really know, like, the logistics of that, but he was in
it's
Florida.
Just a weird
right.
turn of events.
So he was in Florida. He was released to California, where he was serving another sentence for abducting and assaulting 2 different women. And Robert was paroled in 1992 and returned to his hometown, Springfield, Missouri.
Wow. So he's considered a suspect in the case simply because of his record.
Right. Well, a tip had been called in. So the weird thing about this one is Robert was employed as a utilities worker when the women went missing. A job which would have allowed him to easily access a stranger's home. Robert had also previously been on staff at a used car lot where Stacy McCall's father worked. Stacy often visited her father, so it was possible that Cox could have seen her at some point and planned to abduct her. That's a far stretch for me a little bit because it wasn't even at her house, but Robert had an alibi for the time the women went missing, which was initially corroborated with his girlfriend, although later she retracted her statement.
Oh, wow.
The police tried to question Robert 3 times in a prison cell in Texas, where he's serving a life sentence again for an armed robbery.
But who knows? He could be out in 18 months.
Yeah, who knows?
God.
So he said he knew the women were dead and the perpetrator had experience and knew what they were doing. He also said he would tell them everything when his mom died one day. So the police feel like there are some decent connections between the two, but also feel like Cox could just be bored and really just messing with them because he has a life sentence. So there's nothing else for him to do.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think was promising about this is that he was a utility worker, which let's just say he knocked on their door at 3:00 in the morning, dressed in a utility outfit and says, "We have a gas leak. You need to get out of the house."
Exactly. Yeah. And also, how does an ex-con who has a record of abducting women get a job as a utility worker with a van?
I don't know.
That is just so crazy to me.
I don't know. So this next tip was something there's been a lot of controversy about. So there was a journalist that moved to Springfield and began working on the case. Like the police, she had even asked for tips and received many. She received multiple replies from people claiming the bodies of the women had been buried underneath a parking structure at Cox South Hospital. No relation to Robert Cox. They just happen to share the same name.
Okay.
She hired a mechanical engineer who used ground-penetrating radar and found 3 anomalies that he believed were consistent with a gravesite location.
Interesting.
So 2 bodies were horizontal and then 1 body was perpendicular. So the police were skeptical of this assessment and did not feel that it justified the enormous cost of digging up the structure and thus have not done so.
And that's why we have a cold case.
So
maybe.
Right. So the parking structure wasn't even built until 1993. So that means if someone did murder the women, they had to have either kept them alive for a while and murdered them later or like kept the bodies and moved them later. Because this was 1992, parking garage was built in 1993. The hospital said that they have no problem if someone wants to come and do some digging in the garage, but it has to be signed off by the police department.
Okay.
But the authorities won't do it because they don't think like the tip is even credible.
Really?
So that's one thing. Now, 10 years later, in 2002, 2 women called in and gave the police a tip. And they said that 2 men that they had been involved with were employed by a local concrete company in Springfield. And they owned this farm. And they also owned a van very similar to the one police were looking for. Apparently, the men left the Springfield area within 2 weeks of the women disappearing. It's interesting to me because it could be possible that these men could have worked for that company that provided the concrete for the hospital.
Yeah.
And the men would have known the area, been familiar with the site, had access to the site. They could have kept the bodies somewhere else, and when they got this job, thought, oh, this is a great idea to hide this evidence. No one will ever find it.
Oh my God.
So
this case
I know
is hurting my mind.
I know.
Between crazy ex-boyfriend who's decapitating corpses and stealing their teeth to this ex-con living in the area who had abducted women before and was working as a utility worker, to these cement contractors.
I know.
I don't know what to think.
I know.
Where are these girls?
I don't know. The FBI was actually called in on the case in June of 1992, but apparently they didn't get very far either. So literally as of right now, the case is just cold. We have no idea what happened to them.
I'm going to need the police to sign off on that
parking
structure to be dug up. That is the most chilling cold case I think we've covered so far.
I know. It literally has no ounce of closure at all. I mean, not 1 ounce.
Yeah, I want to start a GoFundMe to raise money to dig up this parking structure. But even if I did, the police might not sign off on it.
Oh yeah, they're definitely not going to do it.
God.
It's just weird.
Wow.
And actually, Cheryl and Susie's relatives had them both declared legally deceased in 1997, 5 years after their disappearance. A bench was dedicated to the women in the Victims Memorial Garden in Springfield's Phelps Grove Park. So that is the case of Susie Streeter, Cheryl Levitt, and Stacy McCall, the Springfield Three.
That blew my mind. Well, if you're like me and you need some closure.
Yes, bring me some closure.
I've got a closed case for you. And this was a really challenging case to put together because it takes place in France.
Oh, okay.
This is our first overseas case. And most of the resources available are either written or recorded in French.
So how'd you do that?
I had to rely on Google Translate to piece together as much of this story as I could.
No way.
Yes.
That's awesome, babe. I didn't know you did that.
I'm really committed to this podcast.
Yes, you are.
And our listeners. So
you're welcome.
Yeah. So just in case our listeners are wondering, I do not simply just watch a documentary and then regurgitate what they said or read from an article. Rach and I both do deep dives. And this was the deepest dive I've done so far.
Yeah, that sounds crazy.
So this case is full of a bunch of French names.
Okay.
that I'm probably going to butcher. But I'm actually going to give it a shot.
All right, let's do it. I mean, you did do the machete, so...
I know, I was warming up with machete.
I'm not even going to attempt to do that.
So this is the case of Michel and Nadine Vaujour.
Oh, okay. All right.
Am I turning you on a little bit over there?
No.
Oh.
No.
You're like, no, why would I be turned on?
I never thought the French language is
sexy?
Romantic, yeah. Or
no?
Sexy. No,
What's
I don't.
the sexiest language, do you think?
I like an Australian accent. I mean,
yeah. So
don't do it.
Do you like it when I say there's power in the name of Jesus?
Yes, I do like that. That's nice.
So I sent you a clue earlier this week about the case.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
It was a gif of Arnold Schwarzenegger screaming, "Get to the chopper!"
No, I didn't get it. I don't appreciate you and Kelsey giving me gifs or emojis as clues because I get very confused.
Yeah, I wanted to send you that gif because you're about to get it. Okay, so on Monday, May 27th, 1986, around 10:30 in the morning, prison guards on patrol at France's Lesson prison witnessed a helicopter fly over the area and lower itself into the penitentiary until it was hovering just above one of the buildings. Before they even had time to react or realize what was happening, a cable was dropped from the chopper and a man armed with a submachine gun lowered himself onto the rooftop below. And that man was Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I was like, what?
But doesn't this sound like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie?
Yes, it does. I am quite intrigued.
Yeah. So the guards then witnessed two inmates make their way across the rooftop to the helicopter. one of the inmates grabbed a hold of the helicopter's landing skids, followed by the gunman, but the helicopter took off before the second inmate could even make it on board.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And the whole scene unfolded from start to finish within a matter of moments.
Uh-huh.
It was the most daring escape the prison's officials had ever had to deal with.
So wait, did the second guy jump or did they just leave him?
So more on that later.
Okay.
Let me first introduce you to the subject of tonight's story.
Tell me.
Michel Vaujour.
Oh, that was a good try, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded right to me. I don't know.
He was born on January 16th, 1951, and by the time he was 17 years old, he was already getting into trouble. He was sentenced to prison for stealing a car.
Oh, Michel.
And for the next 2 decades, he would continue to reoffend each time he was released.
Oh, buddy.
By 1973, Michel attempted his first prison escape. He did it by first acquiring some wax from the packaging of a Baby Bell cheese serving.
They had those back then?
I guess so.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds very ignorant. I'm sorry, world. But I didn't know because I never had those growing up. So I kind of thought they were new.
You thought our generation invented that.
Or, just recently. Maybe take that out. I sound very uncultured.
You uncultured swine.
Yeah, I sound like that. But I legit didn't know.
You just thought you were so cultured eating your Baby Bell cheese.
Oh my God.
So yeah, he steals the red wax off of a Baby Bell cheese and carries it around in his pocket for months.
Okay, hold on. Can we just talk about the fact that this must be a prison in France? Because there ain't no way in a prison in America someone's getting a Baby Bell cheese. They get loaf of all sorts of different kinds.
In France, they've got like spaghetti and meatballs.
Oh gosh. All these like assorted meats and cheeses on their charcuterie boards and everything else. And
they're like, would you like some Baby Bell cheese? It pairs quite nicely with this red Merlot.
Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. So he kept in his pocket for months the wax, right?
Yes.
Okay.
He was waiting for a chance to bump into a guard without arousing suspicion.
Okay.
And when the opportunity presented itself, he quickly used the wax to make an impression of the guard's key.
No, how do you do that?
Yes. He then used that negative impression to fashion a new copy of the key by shaving a piece of metal in his cell and managed to escape.
No.
And he was free for a few months.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Yeah, but they did end up catching him again, and he was put back in prison. By 1980, this is years later, during one of his court hearings, Michel stunned everyone when he suddenly pulled a gun from his pocket and took the magistrate hostage.
What?
In the middle of his court hearing. Yes. What everyone didn't know was that the gun wasn't real. He had carved it from a bar of soap and finished it with some black shoe polish before the hearing had even begun.
No way. This guy is...
I know.
Resourceful.
I know.
Mean, man.
He then managed to escape, but not before obtaining a real gun, which he used to shoot a French police officer in the leg.
Oh, Lord.
As he was making his escape. In 1981, this is a year later, he began robbing banks and was eventually caught again. So on March 8th, 1985, Michel, who is now 34 years old, is convicted of armed robbery for all of those bank heists, as well as attempted murder for the time he shot that French police officer in the leg at his court hearing. And he was sentenced to 18 years in France's Les Saints prison, where most of the country's most infamous and dangerous criminals have been incarcerated.
So, like, that's like our Alcatraz back then, or?
Yes. But unlike Alcatraz, this prison is in the middle of a populated city.
Oh, weird.
I want to give you and our listeners an idea of what this prison is like, and I actually brought pictures for you.
Ooh, I want to see.
Yeah. Okay, let me show you these pictures of Les Saints.
Yes, please. And even the name sounds better than any American prison.
Yeah, so the name in French means health. And the name of this prison is actually quite ironic for what goes on in there.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I'll start by showing you this picture because it's located right in the heart of Paris.
Nuh-uh.
Yes.
Oh, weird.
Doesn't it look like a Star Destroyer from Star Wars just landed in the middle of France?
Yes, it does. It's super weird and has like beautiful trees all around it. And
it's like a city within a city.
Is it still there?
Yeah, it's nestled between cafes and marketplaces all around it.
That is weird.
If you were to walk by this prison, you would be able to hear the shouts of the prisoners within its walls, mingled with the sounds of laughing children from a primary school just down the street.
No.
And in the 1980s, there was even a cafe located directly across the street where inmates would walk immediately after being released and drink to their newfound freedom.
That's weird.
Isn't that wild? Well, I know there are prisons within populated cities.
Well, they're usually
but this
jails.
was the Alcatraz of France.
Yeah, that's so weird.
So to have it right in the middle of Paris is really wild. This is where France's most notorious criminals were housed. Can you imagine if your kids were enrolled in the primary school down the street from this prison?
No.
There also used to be a guillotine constructed just outside the prison walls, where citizens were invited to witness public executions.
No!
And while it no longer exists...
Oh, well, thank God.
The last time it was used was in 1939, which is only 81 years ago.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That means that right now, in the year 2020, there may still be people alive today who can say they have actually witnessed a public beheading by guillotine.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Is that not a weird thought?
Yes.
Okay, so in 2000, Le Centre's chief medical officer, Véronique Vaujour, published a book in which she exposed the horrible conditions that existed inside this prison.
Oh, no.
She stated that the compound was overcrowded and infested with rats and cockroaches.
Ugh.
Although the facility had been designed to accommodate 1,400 inmates, it was actually housing 2,300
Oh my
time.
Lord.
In a report published by a French lawyer, Etienne Noel, in 2013, he stated that each inmate had no more than 6 square feet to themselves, which was less than the size of their bunk.
Oh no.
Yeah. Many of the prisoners would often resort to suicide as a means of escape by drinking disinfectants.
Oh, gosh.
And as the institution's chief medical officer, Veronique reported she was treating infections that were usually only attributed with wartime, such as trench foot, which is a condition that occurs when a person's feet are constantly submerged in damp living conditions.
Oh, it's so gross.
And I just want to say that although I have never had to face the kind of living conditions that exist in prison, I have had the privilege of traveling to some pretty remote corners of the globe and experiencing some living spaces that definitely put my spoiled American lifestyle into perspective. And I think that one of the most challenging living conditions you and I have ever experienced as a middle-class U.S. citizen was our first trip outside the country together when we went to Belize in 2006.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I guess we should mention we were on a missions trip with our church at the time.
Yes.
So not only were we supposed to be serving the Lord while we were making eyes at each other, but dating was also kind of a controversial topic in the church we grew up in.
Yes.
So do you remember the tree houses that we stayed in? So in this little village where we were staying, it was right on the bank of a river that would overflow during the rainy season. And so they had constructed huts that were literally 12 feet up in the air, would you say?
Yeah.
Up on these giant poles. They were basically tree houses.
Right. I mean, it's true.
And that's where we slept. Do you remember the shower that the locals called the Widowmaker?
I do remember that.
This is where I experienced culture shock for the first time as an American. The shower that they had was literally PVC pipe sticking out of the wall with an electric heating coil wrapped around the
exposed. Pipe. Yeah, exposed.
Yeah, and that electric coil would heat up and heat the water coming through the PVC pipe. And if you weren't careful, you could get electrocuted. And that's why they called it the Widowmaker.
Oh, I remember. It was terrifying.
I remember showering in that thing, and every now and then it would spark,
Ugh.
or it would just make the sound. It would go like that. And every single time it did, I would flinch. It would scare me so bad.
Well, and you're not like in a position where you can't shower. Like you have to shower.
Because we're literally stepping in
sewage,
human waste during the day. So like we have to take showers in order to keep ourselves healthy. Oh, I have to mention the bugs at this place.
No.
Well, you weren't in the room with the guys and I, but in our room, we looked down one night and we saw this cockroach crawling across the floor.
I remember
with this giant tail on it. And I remember us thinking, what in the world is that? So we took a closer look. Turns out it was a scorpion carrying a cockroach on its back.
So
and
gross.
That was the moment that I realized I was going to be sleeping in my sleeping bag, zipped all the way inside.
Oh, I wrapped myself in the fitted sheet like a cocoon.
That was also the trip that our friend Kevin got sent back to the States.
Oh, man.
Because he went streaking. Do you remember that?
Yes, we should do a whole podcast on that crazy trip, because do you remember that hotel that he streaked at? It was like something from the Twilight Zone.
It was completely abandoned.
And like the lights were flickering.
And all the furniture was wrapped in that plastic.
In that plastic from like your grandma's, you know, like back in like the 70s.
It was really creepy.
It was so weird.
And it was freezing. Do you remember how cold it was?
I don't.
Inside that hotel?
That part.
That's usually a sign that it's haunted.
Oh, great. Well, probably because it was so weird.
Yeah. So back to Le Centre prison. This is where Michel was destined to spend the next 18 years of his life.
Oh, man.
I just want you to understand why an escape of this magnitude was something he was willing to attempt.
Right.
So Michel's sister Chantal was the only one who visited him on a regular basis. But while in prison, he befriended another man who was awaiting trial for armed robbery, and that was 28-year-old Pierre Hernandez. And the two began to plan their escape. Meanwhile, a local helicopter rental agency, owned and operated by a 47-year-old Claude Roumet, was about to meet a very interesting customer. Her name was Lena Rigon, and Claude said she appeared to be about 30 years old and was, quote, a pretty little woman, the sportswoman type.
What?
I don't even know what that means.
Okay.
But based on Claude's description, I just keep picturing Sporty Spice and the Spice Girls.
Okay. All right.
A pretty little woman, the sportswoman type.
That's so weird.
By the way, I had the biggest crush on Ginger Spice. Who is your NSYNC or Backstreet Boy crush?
I was all about Hanson back then.
Oh my God, Hanson.
I loved Hanson.
You like a little bop, flip a top, bop, doo wop, whatever they said. Well, Sporty Spice, Lena Rigon, provided a valid helicopter pilot's license and requested to fly Claude's Alouette 2, a dual-controlled helicopter that he rented for about $315 an hour. She returned the helicopter later that day and left. Over the course of the next 6 months, Lena returned about every 2 weeks, always asking to rent the same Alouette 2 and always paying in cash. Sometimes she would come alone, and sometimes she would even bring 1 or 2 passengers with her. But Claude said she never gave him any trouble. On Monday, May 26th, 1987, Lena arrived at Claude's rental agency with another man who was carrying a sports bag. And once again, she requested to rent his Alouette 2 for 1 hour. The two then took off and flew in the direction of Le Centre prison. Meanwhile, Michel and Hernandez shocked Le Centre's prison guards when they suddenly pulled a couple hand grenades from their pockets.
A hand grenade?
And threatened to detonate them if their demands weren't met.
What?
So you may be wondering how 2 inmates managed to acquire military-grade explosives from behind bars?
Yes, sure am.
Well, once again, Michel was bluffing.
Soap? Again?
Nope, this time he used nectarines.
No way.
Which he painted to resemble hand grenades.
Oh my gosh. He is so resourceful.
I know. So wielding nothing but a handful of fruit,
That's so crazy.
The two men made their way to the prison's roof, where they hid behind a chimney stack and waited for their flight. As Lena and her co-pilot approached the penitentiary, she ignored several radio warnings that her helicopter was flying well below the legal altitude. Soaring into the compound, she located Michel and Pierre and lowered the chopper until she was hovering just above the rooftops where they were hiding. Her co-pilot then opened his sports bag, revealing a loaded submachine gun, and using a cable lowered himself down to the rooftop below. And it's at this point that I imagine him yelling in an Arnold Schwarzenegger voice, "Get to the chopper!"
You are so crazy.
So the two inmates made their way across the rooftop, where Michel jumped onto the landing skid with the gunman right behind him. But the three took off before Pierre even had a chance to get on board.
Oh, no.
So by the time prison guards realized what was happening and could react and reached the rooftop where Pierre had been left behind, he quickly surrendered without a fight.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
And he later told investigators that although he and Michel had planned their escape together, when the moment came, he just decided not to go through with it.
Oh, okay.
And I feel
Good job, Pierre. Good job.
Well, I feel like at this point, Pierre's kind of in denial about what just happened.
Right.
Because instead of facing the fact that his friend Michel had just left him behind, it's like he's just telling himself that he didn't even really want to go.
Right.
It's like when you find out that all your friends are hanging out without you and you're like, okay, no, it's fine. You know, I didn't even want to go anyways. But instead of like getting to go home and like drown his feelings in a bowl of ice cream, he has to go back to his horrible living conditions in that prison.
Yeah.
And so when the guards interview him, he's like, you know, it's fine. I didn't even really want to be free.
Oh gosh.
I feel like he's just in a little bit of denial.
Yeah, just a bit.
Well, a few minutes after the helicopter took off from La Sainte, students at a nearby dormitory watched as a helicopter flew over the campus and landed on the school's athletic field. They then saw two men and a woman exit the chopper and run to a car that was parked nearby. By the time police arrived on campus, the fugitives were long gone. Suspecting the abandoned helicopter may be booby-trapped, investigators called in police canines who had been trained to sniff out explosive devices, but they didn't find anything.
Okay.
Investigators soon tracked that Alouette 2 back to Claude in his rental agency, where they learned that the woman he had leased it to had actually been renting the same helicopter every 2 weeks for the past 6 months. And it was then that investigators informed Claude that the woman to whom he had been leasing his aircraft was not named Lena Ragon.
Uh-oh.
She was none other than Nadine Vaujour, Michel's wife.
Oh, okay.
After her husband had been sentenced 2 years earlier, Nadine had quietly enrolled in a local flight school where she had learned how to fly a helicopter and got her pilot's license.
Okay, Nadine.
She had then used her pilot's license to rent and familiarize herself with Claude's Alouette 2 while she helped Michel plan his escape.
That's pretty crazy.
Investigators also discovered that Michel and Nadine had two daughters, Marlene, who was 12, and Betty, who was 8. And the girls were staying with Nadine's mother, so detectives placed her house under police surveillance. However, one press report that I read stated that Michel and Nadine somehow managed to pick up their two daughters from the residence undetected.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Maybe Michel just painted himself to look like a nectarine.
Or like a tree.
Yeah. Just stood on the front property.
Yes. You're so resourceful.
So the family then fled hundreds of miles south to a small town in Dordogne, where they managed to live in complete obscurity among their neighbors.
That's crazy.
But 4 months later, on September 28th, 1986, 3 men were attempting to rob the branch of a French bank in eastern Paris. But police arrived before the robbers could escape, and a shootout ensued.
Oh no.
One of the robbers sustained a serious head injury after being shot by one of the officers and was immediately taken to a nearby hospital where he remained in critical condition. But thanks to his tattoos, police soon identified the man as none other than the wanted fugitive, Michel Vaujour.
No.
But before they could ask him any questions, Michel slipped into a coma.
What?
The two other robbers were later identified as 40-year-old Francois Clat and Francois's brother-in-law, 35-year-old Philippe Jacquemin. A few days later, Michel's wife Nadine was arrested at their hideout in southwestern France. And during her trial, Nadine was given the opportunity to portray her comatose husband, Michel, as a seductive con artist who had manipulated her into helping him escape prison.
What?
But she remained adamant that her actions were motivated by nothing other than their undying love for one another.
Wow.
Yeah, she wouldn't paint him that way. So Michel eventually recovered from his coma, and once he was healthy enough, he was returned back to prison.
Of course.
It was like, you feeling better? Good.
Oh, great.
And then cuff him. And he had to serve the remainder of his 18-year sentence. But this time, instead of helping Michel escape, Nadine decided that it was time to move on.
Oh, no.
And the lovebirds split up.
Oh, that's sad.
However, in 1991,
oh, great.
5 years later, a 21-year-old law student named Jamila became interested in Michel's case, and she began writing him letters in prison. Their correspondence began growing increasingly personal.
Okay, so he's like 40, right?
He's 40 years old now.
Yeah, and he's talking to a 21-year-old?
Not just talking. She soon began visiting Michel in prison, and not long after, Jamila agreed to help Michel carry out another helicopter escape.
Oh my gosh.
Only Jamila wasn't as good as Nadine.
Oh no.
She got caught. And she was sentenced to 7 years in prison.
Oh no.
Years later in 1999.
And she was a law student? Oh, girl.
Yeah. And years later in 1999, Jamila and Michel actually got married behind bars. And then in 2003, Michel was finally released on parole. He eventually wrote an autobiography about his life, which was published in 2005, and he even filmed a documentary called My Greatest Escape. Over the course of his life, Michel spent a total of 27 years behind bars, 17 of which were spent in solitary confinement.
Oh my gosh.
And another 3 years on the run. He had attempted to escape from prison no fewer than 5 times.
That's crazy.
And as far as Le Centre Prison, amidst public outrage, Le Centre Prison was recently closed for renovations several years ago in 2014 and is scheduled to reopen in a year now.
So what'd they do with all the prisoners?
They moved them.
That's crazy.
So you can go tour Le Centre Prison.
Well, we'll have to do that next time we're in Paris.
Yeah. Maybe get some Baby Bell cheese, some nectarines.
What a crazy story.
Isn't that wild?
That guy is so resourceful, though. I gotta hand it to him.
Yeah.
Good job, babe, doing all of the translating and interpreting. That's awesome.
High five. You have a mugshot story for me, right?
I do, and this one cracks me up.
I can't wait.
So on March 24th, 2008, a masked man armed with a gun went into the Velasquez Mufflers for Less in Chicago, demanding money from employees. The employees told him they had little money and they couldn't open the safe.
They're like, it's in the name, dude. Mufflers
for less.
Oh, I feel like if I was going to rob a place, it wouldn't be a place with the words for less in the title.
Well, the employees told him, we have little money and I can't open the safe. So the man left 2 phone numbers for them to call when the owner returned with the combination.
2 different phone numbers. It was like, hey, if you can't reach me at this one, call my mom at this number.
Just ask for me.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's not after 8.
That is
he
wild.
Said, you guys better call me because otherwise I'm going to come back and shoot you.
Oh my God.
So instead, they called the Chicago police. So officers dressed in plain clothes came to the shop and told the employees to call the man and tell him, hey, our owner's back. You can come rob us now. So the man returned about noon wearing the same mask, black clothing.
You know what? Do we really expect more from the guy who's robbing a Mufflers for less?
It's just crazy to me. So the officers told the employees to get to the back of the shop. The police said the teen pulled a gun. Oh, it's a teen, by the way. The teen pulled a gun from his hooded sweatshirt, and at least one officer opened fire on him.
Oh my God.
So it wasn't life-threatening, but they did shoot him a couple times.
Oh.
So the employees, though, were like legit worried that the man's friends may return to like
finish the job.
Yeah. The police gave them instructions on what to do, you know, if that ever happened. But it never ceases to amaze me what people will do for an easy buck.
Well, just a reminder, we love reading stories from our listeners about some of your most frightening experiences. So if you have a story we could share on the podcast, please send it to us at hotcupcoldcasepodcast@gmail.com.
And even if you don't have a story, please share the podcast with your friends and encourage them to listen. The more listeners we have, the more stories we can collect and share with you.
Also, if you're enjoying the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and other streaming services. The more 5-star ratings and reviews we receive, the easier it becomes for people to find us in their podcast directories.
And finally, for even more things to keep you up at night, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Hot Cup Cold Case Podcast or subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Hot Cup Cold Case is written and produced by Rachel and myself, with music by Young Kool-Aid. If you ever need your mug filled
or your spine chilled,
this is Hot Cup
Cold Case. Okay, do you think I could get away with a cough drop?
Yeah.
My throat is hurting.
Well, I let you get away with that bouncy ball.
Shut up. Leave me and my bouncy ball alone. It makes me happy. It supports me in ways you can't.
It supports you in ways I can't? Oh my God.
I am hilarious tonight.